A sunny Sunday in the middle of winter. There are few visitors around now. The cattle are inside, and the sheep are in the lower fields, being fed hay to supplement what grass can be foraged. The landscape seems timeless. Wharfdale was carved over 10,000 years ago by a glacier, which melted when the climate warmed, leaving behind the classic U-shaped valley and the steep fell sides draining into the River Wharfe. At one time, this would all have been covered in forest, but it has been cut down over the centuries, and now the land is managed from the moor top to the riverbed. The Bolton Abbey estate is owned by the trustees of the Chatsworth Settlement, a beneficial trust created by the 11th and current Duke of Devonshire. It covers 30,000 acres of the valley between Beamsley and the edge of Burnsall. The whole of the estate lies within the Yorkshire Dales National Park and is of considerable heritage and conservation value. Bolton Abbey is the village, although most, technically incorrect, refer to the Priory church as the Abbey. Building began in 1155, and it still remains a place of prayer today, and a place of pilgrimage for walkers, fishermen, young people to play in the wharf, and somewhere for families to enjoy the sunshine on a sunny Sunday in the summer. But all that is now 6 months away. Plans are being drawn up for the forthcoming year at the estate office in the centre of the village.
I have commissioned.
Monthly planning meetings are held between the estate manager, Ben Hayes, and his team of department heads that cover the moors, woodland, river, conservation, gardens, visitor attractions and access, all overseen by the finance department, of course. 75 people are employed, and it costs several £1 million to maintain and run the estate annually. The estate includes land and properties that are let to tenants. There are 54 farms, numerous commercial premises, including hotels, cafes and shops, as well as over 200 houses. Most of the estate's work goes unseen by the majority of visitors. In the winter, workers can be found maintaining the network of 80 miles of paths that crisscross the estate. On the moors there is an access agreement. This means that the estate has agreed to let walkers to cross using specified tracks. They can be closed to stop people being endangered during the grouse shooting season or in long periods of dry weather to stop fires. Heavily worn paths are repaired using local material. Slate from Ingleton for paths around the Priory and limestone higher up. They blend in with the landscape and provide a protective surface. With thousands of walkers every year walking all or part of the Dales Way long-distance footpath, the fences and stiles are well used and have to be repaired. In the fields, essential tasks such as building fences around trees stops rabbits chewing the young shoots or cows leaning against them for a good scratch. Down by the river, overhanging branches are cut back in places. This is done for a number of reasons. If you are walking, you get to see the river and the wildlife around it. And it also creates a mixed environment of light and shade for the trout and greyling. Coppicing takes place a little further back from the riverbank, ensuring that there is room for trees to grow and light can reach the wood floor. This is in Strid Wood, one of 5 sites of special scientific interest on the estate, noted areas rich in native flora and fauna. In the wood, there is an exhibition centre that explains about the trees, flowers and wildlife. This ancient ash is being felled. It has been part of the landscape for well over 230 years, but disease has killed it, and as it lies adjacent to a bridleway, it must be felled for users' safety before high winds blow it down. It will be replaced, although it will take at least 150 years to reach its full height. That tree was comparatively young compared to this one. the lawned oak on the Storifs Road. It is thought to be over 800 years old and got its name from John of Laund, who was prior from 1286 to 1330 and born hereabouts. Over the years it has developed a large crack, big enough for an adult to walk into. Towards Burnsall, the estate manages over 1,000 acres of commercial woodland, and in autumn and winter, saplings are planted to replace those cut down at the end of the previous year. The land here is very poor and extremely stony. In this 7-acre site, over 7,500 saplings are being planted. They won't be cut until at least the year 2020, during the first thinning of the crop when a proportion are removed. Thinning will be carried out every 7 years until clear felling in the next century. Most of the wood will go to the sawmill in the village. The trunks are rolled into place and fixed so they cannot move about. The first cut of the bandsaw removes the bark, which is later ground up for use as mulch chippings to put around trees or as cover for herbaceous borders. Some of the cut wood heads back to the estate for use as fencing, or sold commercially for farm building timber, roof trusses or window frames. One of the main features of the estate is the extensive heather moorland. They're not found so much in Upper Wharfdale, where the rock is predominantly limestone. Heather loves the acid peaty soils associated with millstone grit. On the moor, the head keeper, Brian Shepherd, and his team of keepers burn patches of heather, creating a mosaic of different aged heather stands during the dormant winter months. Heather serves a number of functions, but mainly it is to give a wide range of heather habitats, from soft and short to tall and woody. Different types of ground nesting birds like different heather habitats. The moors are principally maintained for the native red grouse that live on the moor tops all year round. They like to nest in hollows called scrapes in long heather and feed off the new shoots of the shorter heather. Partridge and pheasant also nest on the moors, usually lower down. Although it is winter and the ground is wet, the heather quickly catches fire and spreads rapidly, as at 1,200 feet it is invariably windy up here. Burning only burns off the visible part of the plant. It leaves the roots unaffected. The ash created acts as a fertilizer and new shoots will appear in the spring. Brian uses a beater to control the spread of the fire. He has to be careful which day he burns on. If too windy, the whole moor could ignite. This patch won't be burnt again for another 6 or 7 years. Adjacent patches burnt on previous years act as natural fire breaks, as do tracks that cross the moor. These are repaired at this time of year by the keepers. Here a digger is being used to reopen an overgrown turn-by, a channel that lets rainwater drain off the tracks. The tracks are used all year round. In winter to put down grit for the grouse, to supplement nature's supplies. The keepers also keep a check on predators such as foxes, stoats and weasels that can eat eggs or kill chicks. The role of gamekeeper has gone on for centuries, although man has lived in this area for thousands of years. A stone circle, thought to date from 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, can be found on Fancarl Top, and cup and ring stones at Black Hill, all in alignment with Simon's Seat. On Crail Hill, overlooking Appletree Wick, you can make out these ridges of old field systems. Early relics can also be found in St Wilfrid's, Burnsall Parish Church. This is a rare hogback tomb that dates from the Viking period, the 10th century. The hog, a wild boar, is lying on its back with its head at the top and tail curved round at the bottom. The top is made to look as though it has tiles on it, so that the dead person has a roof over his head. This one is very badly eroded. A better example from Burnsall is kept at the Craven Museum in Skipton. The church also has a preaching cross, with ring chain carving dating from the same period. It would have originally stood about 6 feet tall and been brightly coloured. It's likely that the first church built here was after a visit by St Wilfrid, the Bishop of York, from 669 to 709. Most of the church you see today dates from around the mid-16th century. We know this as a stonemason's mark at the foot of one of the tower's pillars is the same as that on the part-built west tower of Bolton Priory, built between 1520 and 1539. These windows in the De Romilly Chapel are thought to have come from the former 12th century chapel that stood here. The stained glass window in the St Wilfrid's Chapel depicts him at Lindisfarne and as Bishop of York. Below it, and inset into the wall, is a very rare 14th century alabaster. It was uncovered in 1858 and would have been one of a series that would have been found around an altar. It represents the three kings offering gold, frankincense and myrrh to baby Jesus. Also look out for the font, which dates from somewhere between the 9th and 11th century. Judging by the carving, many people believe it to be of the earlier period. High on the south aisle centre arch is this ram's head, reminding us of the industry that keeps the dale alive. On the way out, look for this interesting plaque adjacent to the porch. It says that the church was beautified by William Craven in 1612. He was born at Appletree Wick in 1549 in a cottage that was converted into St John's Church in 1898. Like Dick Whittington, he went to London, made his fortune as a merchant and became Lord Mayor of London in 1611. He never forgot where he came from and made many donations to the area. We will meet him again later on. When you entered St Wilfrid's churchyard, you will have come through this unusual gate. It's called a Lich Gate. It swings on its central post and is the only one in Yorkshire. In the graveyard are the village stocks, still in their original position, although the one at Appletree Wick is more suitably placed. Now meet father and son, Michael and Ian Parkinson, who have a sheep and dairy farm at Barden. Ian is the third generation of the Parkinson family to farm in this area. They have been tenants of Home House Farm since 1966. Spring is a busy period for them, when the sheep have to have their horns burned before they are moved on to the moor tops. Their mark, LP, the initials of Michael's father, identifies that the sheep belong to them. In the fields, the first lambs are about to be born. They have over 300 Swaledales and expect around 400 lambs to be born. Within a few minutes of birth, these lambs will be up and walking around. They are then collected and taken with their mothers to fields closer to the farm. This circle of life goes on in the River Wharfe too. To augment the stock of native brown trout, additional trout farmed at the hatchery adjacent to the river are released. 800 this year are being put in at selected points along the 5-mile stretch of the wharf between Barden Bridge and Beamsley before the fishing season commences on the 25th of March. These trout are 2 years old, big enough to fend for themselves. They like deep pools near the riverbank close to bolt holes to escape danger. This part of the wharf is 20 miles downstream from its source. It flows a further 60 miles before joining the Ouse at Cawood, eventually flowing into the Humber estuary and out into the North Sea. The water in the river can appear to be quite brown. This discoloration is from the peat that rainwater soaks through on the fell side. The river is one of the reasons why the Priory church was built here. It's in a beautiful setting. It sits on a level piece of land above the floodplain, on a bend in the river. Originally, it was established at Emsey, 4 miles away, in 1120. But as it struggled to survive, the de Romilly family, lords of Skipton, gave the lands here to build the Priory in 1155. The Priory was founded by Augustinian canons, the so-called Black Friars. Life was very disciplined here. They were forbidden from leaving the grounds. They had to be silent most of the day and devote their time to prayer. The last service started at midnight, and the first service started at sunrise, as early as 4 a.m. in the summer. A canon was appointed to keep them awake. Monastery life might have been austere, but they were wealthy, as lands around here and further afield were given by rich landowners to support the Priory in the hope that they would be assured of a place in heaven. The Bolton Abbey estate was accrued by these friars from these gifts and by the purchase of additional land, such as the manor of Appletree Wick in 1300 for £450. A judicious buy, as later lead was found here. The de Romillys were the original patrons, but when their line died out, it passed to the Cliffords in 1310 and via marriage to the Boyles, Earls of Burlington in 1643, and then to the Cavendish family, Dukes of Devonshire in 1753. There were never more than 20 canons here. They relied upon a team of servants and around 200 local people to carry out jobs such as construction and farming. Granges, farms were established. They were mostly sheep farms, as wool was a very valuable commodity. But they also did some arable farming. But the land around here is unsuitable for crops and is now solely used for pasture. There is one unusual grange you can see today, the mock Beggar Hall at Appletree Wick. It's not the original building, as this building dates from the late 17th century. The projecting wing is highly unusual in that the door is reached by an outer staircase. The upper windows have decorated lintel stones, and above them and inbuilt into the wall, nesting holes for pigeons. The friars controlled industry in the area until 1539, when Henry VIII abolished all monasteries. This was as a direct result of the Pope in Rome forbidding Henry a divorce. Piqued, he outlawed Roman Catholicism and appointed himself as head of the church in England, which he founded. He confiscated all their wealth and then sold off the lands. The estate was bought by Henry Clifford in 1542. With other monasteries in Yorkshire, Henry had the roofs stripped of lead and left them to decay. Not so at Bolton. He allowed part of the nave to be used for Church of England services, as technically the parish church for the Priory was Holy Trinity Church at Skipton, where canons were often appointed vicar. The Priory had always been used for local services, but it was thought that the 12-mile walk to and from Skipton too far. The Priory Church remained a chapelry to Skipton until the parish of Bolton Abbey was created in 1864. If you wander around the Priory ruins, look out for a number of notable features. The Priory was built in different phases over many centuries, but things didn't quite work out as they should have. The central tower is not square, as neither of the cross transepts were. A further tower was begun at the west end in 1520, but was never completed. This is the tower you enter the Priory Church by. The Norman doorway and original western front wouldn't have stood in front of you if the tower had been completed. This space was left so that the front could be taken down and the tower tied into the nave. We are lucky in being able to see something that stood for 300 years, which would have been taken down without any record of it. The tower was built by the last prior, Richard Moon. It has been deduced that the children's rhyme, Hey Diddle Diddle, was a result of Prior Moon being diddled, robbed, over the sale of some cows by a local family called Hay, and his dog, on the tower he was having built, was laughing at him. The Priory used to have a corn mill, a tannery and a hospital. All of these have since been demolished. Originally, you would have come through a gatehouse. It still exists. Look across from the Priory to Bolton Hall. In the castellated central part, you can still see the arch of the gateway. The hall had additional wings built on in the 17th and 19th centuries, and today is the Yorkshire residence of the Duke of Devonshire, and often used by other members of his family. On the road that passes through the village and runs behind Bolton Hall, you may wonder what the stone arch is that only allows one vehicle at a time to pass through. It dates from the 17th century and was built as an aqueduct to carry water for the mill wheel that used to stand the other side of the wall. Besides the religious side to the Priory, they provided alms to local people, especially the old, sick and poor that ceased with the dissolution in 1539. To fill this gap, Lady Anne Clifford had 6 almshouses built at Beamsley in 1593. But it was her mother, Margaret, who built the hospital, which is accessed through the archway that leads to the hospital. A most unusual building. Not only is it circular, but it also has a raised centre where windows, arranged like a lantern, provide the light. Why? In the centre is a chapel, with pews arranged around the walls. From here, 5 doors lead off to the 7 bedrooms for the infirm. Each room has its own fire, and just enough room for a bed and some belongings. Since 1981, the Landmark Trust has looked after the building, and it is rented out as holiday accommodation, the most unusual in the area. The most well-known accommodation is provided at the Devonshire Arms Country House Hotel. It was originally built in 1753 as a coaching inn, and has steadily grown in size. The latest redevelopment was in 1982, when a new wing with 29 further bedrooms was built. It has also grown in reputation, and in 2003 gained a Michelin star. The head chef is Michael Wignall, and in the kitchens devoted to the Burlington Restaurant, he creates exquisite dishes, such as this sautéed cannon of lamb. The sliced lamb is arranged on the lentils, and then topped off with lamb's tongue and a confit of tomato. Now it is ready to be served. Diners in the Burlington Restaurant sit at antique tables and use silver cutlery. The wine cellar has a selection of over 1,600 bins. The Burlington Restaurant is only open during the evenings, but the hotel has a lively brasserie that is very popular at lunchtimes and in the early evening, with people from Ilkley, Harrogate and Skipton. Private rooms are also available for formal dinners and weddings. The hotel is even licensed for civil ceremonies. Other rooms are available for business meetings. A health and leisure club has been developed across the road in a converted barn for guests and members living close by. It has a swimming pool, sauna and gym facilities. The estate also owns another hotel, the Devonshire Fell Hotel at Burnsall, which affords one of the classic Dales views over the bridge and village. There is more affordable accommodation for groups of young people at the Bunk Barn at Barden. Here, groups of up to 25 can be accommodated in dormitory-style bedrooms. The barn lies adjacent to Barden Tower that was first built in the 11th or 12th century as a forest lodge, a base for those employed in looking after the surrounding Barden forest. In 1485, it became the principal home of the Clifford family. Henry Clifford, known as the Shepherd Lord, chose to live here rather than at Skipton Castle. He got his unusual nickname as he was sent to live with locals in the Lake District shortly after he was born, away from the enemies of his father. After his father's death, he was told of his true identity. Barden Tower had first been fortified in the early 14th century to repel attacks by marauding Scottish armies during the years 1317 to 1320 after their victory over the English at the Battle of Bannockburn. They created so much havoc in the area that the canons were forced to leave Bolton Priory. But it was the Shepherd Lord who rebuilt the tower as we see it today, with walls up to 5 feet thick. The Great Hall, used for entertaining, was on the ground floor. You can see the original fireplace part way up the wall. It has stood the rigours of time well. It was last lived in during the 17th century, when Lady Anne Clifford had it repaired, enlarging the windows and entrance to the front, even though she did not own it. Although the tower is now in ruins, it did have its own private chapel, the priest's house, which was for many years a farm but is now a restaurant.
Thank you.
Teas are served on the terrace in the summer and wedding receptions held on the lawn. Easter is the traditional start to the visitor season. Even Easter Bunny can be found in Strid Wood, helping children find hidden Easter eggs. People are now out walking. One of the most popular walks is up the Valley of Desolation, so called after a storm in 1826 swept all the trees away. Slowly, trees and plants have recolonised the area. If you're walking up to Simon's Seat via the Valley of Desolation, be sure to take a detour and see the Posforth Gill waterfall, especially after an April shower. It's rather a surprise when you reach Simon's Seat to find a massive gritstone outcrop on top, over 1,000 feet above the valley floor. The views from the trig point overlook the Wharf Valley, and across to the ravine of Troller's Gill. Keen walkers can include this in a comfortable day's walk from Bolton Abbey. It marks a complete change in scenery from the peat and bogs of Millstone Grit country to potholes and caves of limestone country. See how this stream at the top of Troller's Gill suddenly disappears. These sinkholes are created by rainwater turning slightly acidic as it percolates through the peat before it reaches the becks. When it comes into contact with alkaline limestone, it dissolves it and eats its way along, enlarging natural cracks, fissures in the limestone to leave a huge underground network of caverns and passageways. When it hits hard rock, it just as quickly reappears, just like at the bottom of the gill. The gill itself is a mini canyon. It twists and turns, hemmed in by towering limestone cliffs. It's a great scramble up or down the dry stream bed. Do look out for rare plants, especially in spring when the primroses are out. This is home to the Bargwest, a spectral hound with bright yellow gleaming eyes. Could he live in this cave?
Hello!
Don't go too far in, as they can suddenly narrow and drop away very quickly. Leave it to experienced potholers with all the right equipment. If you want to see some of the underground formations created by acid water, there's no better place to go than to Stump Cross Caverns on the moor top. Here you descend 50 feet to see part of the cave system that extends for over 4 miles underground. Although lit, the passageways are dark and narrow, and you have to stoop to go along. But you get to see the wonderful stalactites, the ones hanging off the cave roof, and stalagmite formations, the ones created on the cave floor by the constant drip, drip, drip from the cave roof. These are created by the acid water, carrying dissolved limestone and other minerals, evaporating when reaching air in the caves, and leaving behind a crystalline substance known as calcite. These formations have been given names like the organ, the hawk, and the wedding cake. They weren't formed overnight. They're between 150 and 235,000 years old, and still growing. Above ground in spring and early summer is the time to come and see the wild flowers. The daffodils are out around the Priory, and the woods are carpeted in bluebells. Work continues on the estate. The gardeners are planting seedlings for the hanging baskets, and over 70 will be displayed. All year round on the farm, the cows are milked twice a day, at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. The Parkinsons have a herd of 70 milking cows. It takes around an hour to milk the cows, and each will give around 5 to 6 gallons of milk per day. The milk is stored in the milk vat at a constant temperature and is collected every day. Ian and Alison have 3 sons, 2 of whom go to Burnsall Primary School. As you can see, the building has been in use a long time. Although some people think it looks like a manor house, in fact it was built as a grammar school in 1602. It was wholly funded by William Craven. Pupils received a free education in Latin and English, but had to pay 1 shilling, 5 pence in today's money, a week for maths. Quite a sum in those days. In 2003, due to growing numbers of children, the former head teacher's house on the first floor has been converted into teaching space, and an upper story added to the extension at the rear.
Oliver, you'll have to go against me.
I'll go against
Alice. Millie.
I'll go against
Catherine.
I'll go against Alice.
Ben. Right, now.
Pupils come from surrounding hamlets. A school bus picks them up and drops them back off home. There is another school with just as long a history. The unusually named Boyle and Pettit School at Beamsley. Although the building now in use only dates from the Victorian period, it brought together 2 local schools. Robert Boyle, the brother of Richard, who inherited the Bolton Abbey estate in 1643, was a mathematician and author of Boyle's Law, and keen that others should follow in his footsteps. He gave money to found a school for the education of the nobility, gentlemen and others. The school, built from the Priory ruins and now known as the Old Rectory, stands adjacent to the Priory Church. Sylvester Pettit, on the other hand, left money for the establishment of an elementary school for all. In fact, he wasn't sure whether children should be taught to write. The school was founded at Hazelwood after the death of Sylvester in 1719, although the building you see, with schoolmaster's house in front, was built in 1832. And that's how the Boyle and Pettit School got its name on its merger in 1875. There is one further school in the area, the Wharfdale Montessori School. The infant school is housed in the former Forester's Cottage in Strid Wood. It's not run on traditional school lines with set lessons or working towards exams. Here, children are encouraged to find out about the world around them by themselves, to learn through trial and error. They're encouraged to take part in activities such as feeding the animals or looking after the garden. There's a junior school for children up to the age of 11. This is in the former Barden School that closed in 1931. Again, children are encouraged to use their minds, such as playing games like chess or reading. The teacher is on hand to guide the children so that they learn at their own pace. 1 week every year, the estate welcomes children of local schools to come and find out about their work and learn more about the countryside. For some, it's the first time they will have been out walking on the moors, and the weather is here to prove that it's not always sunny for the estate workers. On Barden Moor, they have come to learn about heather and grouse breeding. This part of Wharfdale lies on millstone grit, which is covered in a thick layer of peat. It's not suitable for farming, as it's acidic and prone to erosion. The long heather roots help to anchor and stabilise the peat. But it's heather, especially this variety, ling, which produces purple flowers in August, that predominates. Until a century ago, it was used locally for roofing. If you go to Grimwith Reservoir at the top of the other side of the valley, Yorkshire Water has thatched a barn with ling. The reservoir sits on top of another that was built in 1864 by Bradford Corporation. The one you see today was completed in 1983 and has the largest surface area of any inland water in Yorkshire. It's 1.5 miles long and makes it ideal for sailing and windsurfing. Yorkshire Water also uses the catchment area of Barden Moor to fill the upper and lower Barden reservoirs. They took 20 years to build and became fully operational in 1873. This water is also piped to Bradford. By the side of the upper reservoir is a gullery, a colony or gallery where an estimated 1,000 black-headed gulls come to nest every year, all in this small marshy area. The school children have a chance to see the eggs and the newly born chicks wandering around the reservoir's runoff channels. The moorlands are alive with things to see. This strawberry-like fruit is a crowberry, and hanging under some heather is a huge dragonfly. During the 18th and 19th centuries, these moors echo to the sound of the pickaxe. At the top of Barden Moor can be found a chimney. What could this be for? You'll be surprised to learn that it was for coal mining. The coal seam has been pushed upwards by geological activity, and it appears near the moor's surface. The seam is not very thick, and the coal of poor quality. This building is now used as a refuge for grouse shooting parties. The coal was sent to the lead smelting mills on Grassington Moor. Lead mines pockmark this area too, especially around Appletree Wick. The easiest to find is Gillhead Mine at the top of Troller's Gill. It was the very last lead mine in the Dales and closed in 1981. Here Galena was mined, which was then smelted for its lead. Lead is typically found in limestone areas, particularly in areas of high geological activity. This part of Wharfdale lies on the Craven Fault. Much of the estate's income comes from rural pursuits and visitors. The Pantry is the first local food shop to be opened in many years. It's being officially opened by the Marquess and Marchioness of Hartington, the Duke and Devonshire's son and wife. Many local shops have closed as they cannot compete with the supermarkets at Skipton and Ilkley. a decline the family seeks to avert. By specialising in locally and Yorkshire-produced foods, it hopes to appeal to both locals and visitors alike. The coming of the railway line in 1888, which connected Bolton Abbey with both Skipton and Ilkley, made the area accessible for day trippers from Bradford and Leeds. The Midland Railway built the 11-mile line. Although the station was built 1.5 miles away from Bolton Abbey, it did not deter day trippers. On one August bank holiday weekend, 40,000 people could be seen streaming from the station to the Priory. Even royalty came by train. King Edward VII was a regular visitor. But the line closed between Ilkley and Skipton in 1965. The steam railway still operates. It was saved by the Yorkshire Dales Railway Museum Trust, but not on the whole length of the original track. It took until 1979 for the section immediately around the terminal at Empsey to open. In 1987, it was extended to Holywell Halt, and 10 years later, it eventually reached Bolton Abbey. It's manned by volunteers, from the ticket office to the driver. Steam trains run every Sunday throughout the year, and every day during the summer. Special events include both 1940s and Thomas the Tank Engine weekends. And at Christmas, Santa specials run too. Today, most people come by car and pay an admission charge in one of the estate's car parks. It's a sunny Sunday and the car parks are full. That's around 2,000 cars. The car park income helps to pay for the upkeep of the facilities visitors use, including tidying up at the end of the day. This is 9 p.m. in the Sandholm car park. The last of 4 collections here was just an hour ago, and it was estimated that around 5 tons of rubbish was collected across the estate this day. If you park in the village car park, you'll be one of the millions that have passed through the hole in the wall over the centuries to see one of the most famous vistas in the Dales. The other popular car park is at Sandholm, the one with the Cavendish Memorial Fountain at the top of the road leading down. This was built in memory of Frederick, the second son of the 7th Duke, who was assassinated in Phoenix Park, Dublin in 1882. Since Victorian times, having a cup of afternoon tea has become an English ritual, and there are a number of tea rooms in the area. The most popular has to be the Cavendish Pavilion by the Sandholm car park. This was built in the late 19th century after the coming of the railway. Buffer's is a most unusual tea room. It's situated on the single-track road that runs through Storifs. It's aptly named, as owner and dairy farmer Keith Blackburn is an avid steam train fan, and visitors can come and play with the train track in an upstairs room. Some never stray far beyond the Priory ruins, but there are some lovely walks along the riverbank. There are 8 crossing points over the river. The oldest is Barden Bridge, that dates from 1659. Although repaired in 1676, after a huge deluge in 1673 washed away many bridges on the wharf, including Bolton Bridge, to many the start of the Dales. At the Priory side lies the Ferry House, a reminder of days before the bridge. In the house is this unusual beam, in a room that was probably once a chapel. It says, "Thou that passes by this way, one Ave Maria, hear you say." The most ornate bridge wasn't built for walkers, but for carrying the water pipeline from Nidderdale Reservoir to Chelker Reservoir, the one with the wind turbines. Burnsall Bridge is probably one of the most photographed in the world. Who could hope for a more perfect setting with the river, the 6-arched bridge, the spire of the Methodist chapel and the tower of the church set against the fells? Other ways of negotiating the river require a bit more nerve. The stepping stones between Drebley and Howgill, or the old monastic stones from the Priory to Storifs. Before the roads were metalled, they were just dusty tracks or green lanes linking the hamlets together. Many of these hamlets today are either farms or collections of scattered houses like Drebley or Hazelwood. But centuries ago they had much larger populations, such as Skyrom, that had both a paper mill and a spinning mill, both long since demolished. Some have also disappeared, such as Woodhouse between Appletree, Wick and Burnsall, although the postman still stops here. These hamlets don't miss out. The mobile library calls in every 3 weeks, bringing news from around the Dale.
You won't get asked again.
Gordon was doing most. I was just seeing to the horses, but
Oh no. They can't it.
And the award-winning newspaper Village Tidings is published 4 times a year and includes news from all outlying villages and hamlets. Towards the end of August, thousands of visitors flock to the 2 traditional feasts and sports held in the area. Burnsall's can trace its origins back to the medieval times and is very little altered. It takes place on the green, with a local brass band accompanying the activities. Like most Dales events, sports play a central part. Some of it is for fun, such as throwing sponges at Alison Parkinson to raise funds for the primary school. Now the head teacher can get her own back. Burnsall Feast also hosts 2 athletic events. The 10-mile road race, quite a challenge in itself, as it is a mostly uphill circuit, although the winner, Otley runner Ian Fisher, won it in just over 54 minutes. But it pales in comparison with the classic fell race, a simple race of 1.5 miles straight up and down the fell. It's thought to have started as a bet in the Red Lion, and the first races were run naked, apart from your hobnailed boots, that is. It's 1,000 feet of ascent, and the winner, Rob Hope of Pudsey and Bramley, seen here descending, won this race in a time of 13 minutes and 51 seconds, including negotiating this dry stone wall. Come on, you're meant to do it in 1 leap. It's popular too with junior fell runners, who only run as far as the Moor Gate. Later, everyone enjoys the egg-throwing competition.
Welcome.
And the rector of St Wilfrid's wishes everyone a safe journey home. The Bolton Abbey Fete, held for the first time in many years, takes place on the lawn in front of Bolton Hall. This year, the Duchess of Devonshire is the guest of honour. Sports again play a central part, as do such fun activities as a worm hunt, and ferret lotto. Which tube do you think it will come out of? If that's all too much, you can go and watch the Bolton Abbey cricket team beat Pateley Bridge in the local league. Away from all this hustle and bustle is Parcevall Hall, beyond Skyrom. It's run as a retreat by the Diocese of Bradford and attracts church groups and individuals from all over Britain to its wide range of events and short courses. The hall, owned by the trustees of Walsingham College, is only open to its guests, but now you can have a quick peek round. It looks a very old building, but appearances can be deceptive. It's thought that it stands on a former grange of the Priory. The front dates from around 1600, although the fall pipe has a date mark of 1775. But most of the hall you see today, you'll be surprised to learn, dates from the 1930s, when Sir William Milner bought the property and extended it using traditional materials and construction techniques so it blends in seamlessly. He also built the terraces and extensive gardens. Although the sculpture trail is more recent. The gardens are open to the general public from Easter until the end of October. Inside is a magnificent 8-foot-wide inglenook fireplace in the lounge. And the dining room, in the oldest part of the house, has a stone-flagged floor. The bedroom over the front door is reputedly the room where the famous highway robber William Neverson sat at the window waiting for travellers from other parts of the Dales to pass by. There is also a tiny chapel that can only seat about a dozen people. Another church is also used as a retreat, the Beamsley Methodist Chapel. It has been partly converted to provide holiday accommodation for people with disabilities and their carers, so that they too can enjoy the countryside. It took 10 years for the project to reach fruition and was opened in May 1996. There is accommodation for 26 people in 8 bedrooms, and in 1999 the former caretaker's cottage was converted to provide further self-catering accommodation. The lambs are getting fatter in the fields, and the meadows are ready to be cut for silage. Contractors from nearby Addingham are brought in, as all the fields can be cut in a day. Silage, grass that is cut when it's green, is stored in great mounds and covered with a plastic sheet. The plastic helps to keep in the moisture, and the heat generated by the grass results in it fermenting. It's used to feed the cattle when kept inside during the winter months. A little later on, the sun has started to dry the grass in the fields, and this is now mown for hay, and left in the field for 3 to 4 days to dry before being baled and stored in the barns. Again, this is used for winter feed. There's no time for a holiday on the farm during the summer. The calves are born in August. Here you can just see the calf's head and front legs emerging. There it goes. It's a bull calf, and Ian is on hand to give it a quick shake to make sure that it's breathing. It's licked clean by its mother. And then tries to stand for the first time. Not this time. Another pregnant cow has come over to give a hand. It's essential that he quickly gets up and moves around. Although it's summer, there's a cold wind blowing, and the calf needs to keep warm and suckle from its mother. In between tending the cows, Ian is also clipping the sheep. They've been brought down to the farm. It's been a hot summer and the sheep don't seem to mind. Before being let out, they're marked with a red dye. As with the horns burnt in early spring, this is to identify the sheep. Each farm has its own particular mark, so lost sheep can be returned. The fleeces are sheared off in one piece, rolled up, and placed in the wool sheet. Unfortunately today, they're not as valuable as they were in medieval times, and the wool is largely used to make carpets. After their ordeal, they're back off to the field. In mid-August, the heather carpets the moors in a sea of purple for a few weeks, although this is threatened by bracken. Bracken was traditionally cut to provide bedding material and was cut every year. Nowadays, there's no commercial use or value for bracken, and if kept unchecked, it will invade the moor, killing off the heather and losing habitat for grouse and grazing for sheep. Bracken can cause blindness in sheep if they eat it, and bracken also harbours sheep ticks that host Lyme disease. You could burn bracken, but it would just regrow as it has a quick-growing root system. The only way to destroy it is by spraying it with a poison that clings to the fronds and, through translocations, is taken into the root systems which are killed. It's not harmful to humans or animals. A helicopter is often the only way acres of bracken can be easily sprayed. Over 200 acres on Barton Moor will be sprayed in a little over an hour. The glorious 12th. The 12th of August is the traditional start of the grouse shooting season. It's a tradition that goes back to the 18th century. It's also known as the sport of kings, and Edward VII and George V were regular visitors to these moors. The beaters are over a mile away, and a whistle is blown to set them off. The guns use walls and butts for camouflage. The beaters, which include local children, walk across the moors in a mile-wide fan shape, using flags to drive the grouse towards the guns. The guns are at the ready. The beaters are driving the grouse forward. The guns take aim. Grouse are very difficult to shoot as they can fly at speeds of up to 80 miles per hour and not necessarily towards the guns. It requires skill to spot the bird and anticipate which way it's going to fly before pulling the trigger. Most grouse escape as they're quick and unpredictable. Because the estate manages the moors, it limits the number of shooting days to the success of grouse bred during April and May. A breeding population needs to be maintained and sustained for future years. The beaters move nearer to the guns. A horn is blown. This signifies that the beaters are approaching the guns. They are now closer together and can be seen by the guns on the skyline. They start to shoot away from them. After a drive, specially trained dogs will sniff out and retrieve the shot grouse without damaging them and bring them back to the gamekeepers. These are then basketed. The tired beaters, who will do 3 or 4 drives a day, return home. The baskets of grouse are taken to the larder on the estate and sorted between young and old birds. They can be told apart by the third wing feather, the softness of the beak and the growth of the claw.
If it's a young bird, it's got one growth.
Younger birds attract a higher price, whereas older birds may be left to hang to intensify their flavour. The majority will be sold to a game dealer, who might send them overnight to restaurants in London and other parts of the world.
You can then look at the claws.
On this day, over 50 people were involved in the drives, and 73 brace, or 146 birds, were shot. Although some people disagree with shooting, in fact, as you've seen, it does provide employment for many people, and the area wouldn't look like it does without it. It's now moving towards autumn. The roadside verges are still being maintained. The last cricket match is being played on the field at Burnsall. It's a special event as the hamlets play one another. They can't all field a full 11, so it's 7 aside. The firstborn lambs on the farm are now big enough to be taken to market to be sold. The first sheep to be sold are the female lambs, called gimmers, so they have to be sorted from the boys, called wethers, not as easy as it looks. The farm keeps around 60 of the lambs for new breeding stock. Since the foot and mouth outbreak in 2000, new controls have been put in place to make sure that an outbreak does not reoccur, especially with the movement of sheep. Homehouse Farm was lucky and was not infected. The farm now has to individually tag each sheep and have a license to move them. A sheep sale is like a beauty parade. The gimmers have to look glamorous. Ian, this time, is just clipping around their faces and a bit of their chest. Later they have a bath, although their bubble bath is very smelly. It contains insecticides to stop scab and flies. It's called a bloom or pearl dip as it contains a dye that will give their coat a nice brown colour to make them look really pretty. The sheep don't seem to mind the dip. In fact, some don't want to get out. Ian has chosen his 40 best sheep for their first lamb sale. His will be slightly smaller than some there because his lambs are born in April. Some farms lamb a month or more earlier. They're loaded onto the trailer and taken to the Craven Cattle Mart at Skipton for sale. Before the foot and mouth outbreak, up to 14,000 lambs a day would have been sold here during the Gimmer sales. Now it's fallen to around 8,000. However, prices for lambs have gone up since, probably because there aren't as many around, and prices this year are slightly up on last. The auction mart runs a ballot system. Names are drawn and a rough time given to the farmers as to when their lambs will be sold. Michael and Ian haven't done so well this year. They're almost at the end of the sale. A disadvantage is that prices may drop throughout the day. But if farmers have not bought enough lambs to fill a trailer, prices will go up at the end. Michael and Ian accompany the lambs into the sale ring. The farmers are buying stock replacements. The auctioneer has to watch carefully as the bids are being made. Fortunately for Michael and Ian, prices have held throughout the day. In fact, the first 20 sold went for more than they were expecting. Happy Dale's farmers? Not one bit of it. The trout fishing season comes to an end on the 30th of September, as they then start to spawn in the wharf's feeder becks. Although grayling can be caught until the end of December. This is the estate's river bailiff Mark Whitehead, fly fishing on the river. He's using an olive emerger pattern, which mimics an upwing fly. He's casting into a deep pool where he hopes to find some trout. He keeps on casting and letting the current carry the fly so that it will catch their attention. Look, he's caught one. He's using a barbless hook that won't catch or tear in the trout's mouth. It takes great skill to land one. Notice how he slowly reels it in. This one he's caught is a wild one. He can tell because it's darker in colour to a farmed one and is slightly smaller in size. A wild trout won't grow much beyond 9 inches, whereas a farmed one can grow up to 12 inches. Produce grown in village gardens is displayed at the autumn vegetable show held at the Boyle and Pettit School, along with work the children have carried out in class. Although the harvest is the culmination of the farming year, it was also a very important time to the monks of the Priory, who used to collect tithes, a tax that was equal to 1/10 of the crop for their own personal use. This was stored in the tithe barn. It probably dates from the early 1600s and is 158 feet long and 35 feet high at its ridge. The roof holds 200 tons of stone. All the weight is carried by the massive timbers, as the stone walls probably replaced rotten timber walls at a later date. It's one of the largest in England and is still in use today by the estate staff, but not for collecting tithes. At the Priory, the harvest service is held. Services are held at 10:30 a.m. every Sunday. The church is open every day and parishioners are on hand to guide you around. On the south wall is a list of the priors. But look above you to see the 6 panels of Pugin-designed stained glass set in the 13th century lancet windows. They were inserted in 1854 and depict the life of Christ. To see some original medieval stained glass, you have to look on the north wall opposite. The king's heads are thought to be either Edward II or III. There is another stained glass window set far back into the west wall. This depicts St Cuthbert, one of the patron saints of the church, holding the head of Oswald, King of Northumbria. But the first paintings you see on entering the church are those on the wall that blocks the arch behind the altar. These were painted around 1890 by local artists Bottomley and Greenwood. Alternate panels show the Madonna lily, and those in between are plants symbolising the life of Christ: barley, olive, vine, passion flower, wild rose and palm. In the north aisle next to the organ can be found an ancient altar stone. It has a cross in each corner and one in the centre on the front edge. It stands on a base made of tiles recovered during excavations in 1923. Before you leave, look above you at the roof bosses. This one is the Green Man, a fertility symbol commonly used throughout Yorkshire. The leaves falling from 100-year-old sessile oaks, beech, yew and ash in Strid wood are every colour. The long hot summer and recent rains mean that they will keep their colour a lot longer this year. There are colour-coded walks around the wood, and the Strid is accessible to wheelchair users from the Sandholm car park. Visitors wishing to visit the Strid can borrow one of the estate's electric vehicles. The autumn rains have also raised the river level, making the Strid a treacherous place. The river, that is about 25 metres wide before it reaches Strid Wood, is channeled down to 2 metres as it hits an outcrop of millstone grit. It's what can't be seen that is treacherous. The water has undercut the base of the rock, making the raging river swirl, twist and turn. Once you're in, you'll be sucked up to 30 feet underneath and battered against the rocks. There will be very little chance of survival. Over the centuries, many lives have been lost, as the seemingly short jump across is a bit further than you think. The most celebrated loss was that of the boy of Egremont, the only son of Alistair Romilly, the first patron of the Priory. Whilst jumping across, his dog held him back, and he fell in and drowned. Ownership of the estate today might have been in completely different hands. The cycle of life is about to start all over again on the farm. In November, the ewes, the female sheep, are mated with a tup, a ram. The farm has 8 tups, and they've been kept apart from the ewes all year. A harness is attached to the ram. It does take 3, as rams are very strong. Underneath is a box that has a sponge soaked in dye that is then left on the ewe it is mated with. Each tup has a different coloured dye. This means that Michael and Ian can easily identify which ewe has mated. The grouse shooting season on the moors ends on the 10th of December, although duck shooting continues till the end of January. Seasoned walkers come to enjoy the solitude of the countryside once again. The cows are inside. The sheep are off the moor, and the estate reviews the past year and plans for the next. Of course, the work never stops. Buildings and walls have to be maintained and repaired. It's heavy work, but 80-year-old Bob Middleton is still at it. Most of the dry stone walls were built 120 to 150 years ago, and some, like this, just topple over as a result of subsidence. Others have to be repaired because people try and climb over them. The larger stones form the base, and as it grows, through stones are put in order to tie the wall together, with smaller stones used as infill. They create much of the character of the Dales. although they do serve a purpose. They provide shelter for sheep against the elements, something a wire fence cannot do. It's essential and costly work for the estate, but vital if future generations are to keep on returning to this seemingly timeless piece of Wharfdale. Now the credits.